G'day, Trooper Cody and Steve with one of our light horse videos, and this one comes from the 8th of November 1917, and we think it was the 8th of November because it's an extract from Ian Idris's diary about the light horse in the Middle East, and Ian wasn't 100% sure of the date when this happened, but it was about a week or so after the fall of Beersheba. What you've got to remember is just because Beersheba fell on the 31st of October 1917 didn't mean that it was all over Red Rover, because Gaza still hadn't been taken and the Turks were putting up a heck of a fight to keep Gaza. They were in retreat in some places, but it was a hard-fought retreat, and they were still bringing up fresh troops, and they were still trying to counterattack. So on this particular day, Ian was part of a squadron of 100 men, 100 light horsemen, and they were given the task by the brigadier to take 2 field pieces that were shelling them from a distance of 4 miles away. Now what I should say is we know where Beersheba was, we know the charge. The guys were now gone around Beersheba and were fighting the Turks that were trying to escape and to reinforce Gaza. They see the 2 guns, and so they take off at the gallop to try and take these guns 4 miles away. Now when they do this, they form artillery formation. What artillery formation means is that each trooper is so far apart that if a shell hits a trooper, it will not get the man either side of him because it's so far apart. And if it lands between 2 troopers, there's every chance both of them will survive. That's artillery formation. They're doing this for the first 3 miles, and they laugh. Ian laughs about how light the casualties were. So the Turkish had infantry and machine guns supporting the field pieces, but we are talking 4 miles. It's a long way. So the guys go 3 miles, incredibly light casualty rate, and they come to a depression in the ground that's quite a significant gully. They go down into it. The 3 miles had been across pretty rough ground, and Ian describes how the horses they're so clever. Horses are charging across the plain. They decide, is it a depression they can jump, or is it one they have to go around? And so they swerve and they go down sometimes, or they go over. But 3 miles later they come to a big enough depression they can go down and have a breather with no bullets or shells getting them. At this point they see that 600 yards or 600 metres further on is what looks like another depression. This would be great because this is going to bring them much closer to the Turk guns. So once again they take off to charge this 600 metres to the next cover. Again they do it in artillery formation, but what they do this time is they spread out along the gully. There are only 3 sections at a time, that is only 12 blokes at a time, line up, they wait, the shells hit, crash, right, go, while the gunners are reloading, and 12 blokes at a time charge out of the gully and race to that 600 metres to get to the next depression. Meanwhile, another 12 blokes are getting ready, waiting for the 2 shells to land, and then they'll go. But they're crafty, because we just took off here. Where are the next 12 going to come from? The Turks don't know, because might be 12 blokes that way down the gully, or it might be 12 blokes that way down the gully. They did it intermittently. Once again, that Ian says that as they're charging, he could actually see the gunners fumbling because they're trying to work out where they should swerve. Ian uses the word swerve the guns to try and get these batches of 12 blokes that are coming over. So they charge another 600 metres down into another depression. This time when they get there, 3 blokes get off, chuck the reins to the horse-handlers in the gully, sitting on his horse, holding 3. The 3 other guys scramble up the side and they open fire on the Turks. What they notice is the Turks will not stand up. The Turks won't stand up and charge. They just stay hunched down. So the Australians slowly try to work their way over the ridge, crawling, shooting, crawling, shooting. The Turks start to fall back. They're crawling backwards too. Not sure how many casualties there were on the Turkish side because they never raised their heads. Very few on the light horse side. Very few casualties again. What's happened is, this is where they're at. On the ground shooting at the Turks, still haven't made it to the guns. Turks, and then they see reinforcements coming. The sun's going down. They're called back. Remount, remount, retire, retire. So they race back into the gully, jump on their horses and take off. What they say is, when they get back, they go 3 miles and they stop. The sun's set, it's just dark. They all get off their horses. There is no food, there is no water. The horses have no food, no water, they're not unsaddled. Girths were probably let loose, but the blokes then all just sat and lay at their horses' heads. And Ian says the horses never moved. They all just went to sleep standing beside their individual troopers. And he says some had both eyes closed and some just had one eye that they kept on their rider. What happened the next morning is the sun comes up, and as the sun comes up enough to see back where the guns were, the call comes from an officer, the guns are going, they're taking the guns. Yes, the Turks had coupled up the guns to the horses and they were in retreat. The squadron of 100 men once again gets told, we're going to take the guns. This time, when they're charging the 3 miles for the guns, there's very little shooting back at them because they can see at this point the Turks are almost in panic mode. Ian says at one stage they're racing across these 3 miles. They see the guns are connected to the teams. They're trying to get away. And one Turkish officer on his horse, waving his sword, hitting his men, trying to get them to stand and fight. But they won't do it, and by the time he's distracting me a little bit. The Turkish officer fails dismally because the light horse are just too close. They charge up to the guns, they shoot and kill a couple of the artillerymen that are still there, the rest have run off. Then the blokes say war is hell. The guys are euphoric. They've just charged 3 miles. They've hardly been shot at. The blokes leap off their horses, grab their rifles, down on one knee, and that's it. They are just like shooting rabbits. They're taking pot shots at every Turk that's running away. What Ian says in his diary, which is written at the time, is they had a rule. You're running away, you might fight another day. We're going to shoot you and try and kill you. As soon as you put your hands up, we will not shoot you. And so it's interesting how Ian records that they kept shooting unless the guys surrendered, and as soon as they surrendered, they turned their attention to shooting blokes that were still running away. They captured the guns. They kept on chasing those retreating Turks, and Ian talks about the incredible amount of equipment, ammunition, rifles, backpacks, food that was just thrown to the side as these guys panic-stricken ran. But that's not the end of it, because fresh Turkish troops came up, and there was lots of them, way more than 100 light horse blokes. So the light horse blokes shot until the Turks who were just marching towards them shot and shot and shot until those blokes were so close they could clearly see their faces. And then the light horse jumped back on their horses and they galloped flat chat a mile. By the time they got a mile, they could get into cover. They then set up, got off their horses, lined up, and they watched those Turks walk for a mile towards them. And they just shot and shot and shot and shot. Turks were dropping. How brave were those Turks? They just kept shooting the Turks until the Turks were so close they could see their faces again. And then the Aussies jumped back on their horses again. They rode a half a mile, this time, to the next cover. They got off. At this point, when they're shooting at those Turks that are just still marching towards them, again, for another half a mile, walking into the face of light horse accuracy from their trios. Ian says that their rifles, barrels and bolts were so hot they could hardly use them because of how hot the barrels and bolts had become. And Ian says that every other man would occasionally have to run back to the horse to get the bandolier of ammunition off the horse's neck to come back because they were shooting so many bullets. So in the end, that same thing happened one more time, and by the time it happened 3 times, the Turkish had been annihilated. There was virtually none of them left. Well, there's 2 days action in the Light Horse in November 1917. How the Light Horse operated, how 100 men could be so successful, the bravery of the Turks, the stupidity of war and the incredible bravery of those Turks. Ian describes vividly their uniforms because you could see it all for so long as they walked towards the men. Enough on that story, plenty more to see here. Have a look at some of the other videos if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Click like, make a comment. Please subscribe. Cheers. Till next time. Thank you.